Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be focusing, obviously, on the COP27, the Conference of Climate Change that is taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh here in Egypt. Now, today we will be focusing on the food security and climate change. There have been many discussions and meetings regarding the food security, the strategies and adaptation strategies for the food shortage. But before we start our topic tonight, let's check out some of the stories making the news today. And we'll start off with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who urged the rapid, effective, equitable implementation of climate commitments and pledges to overcome the current crisis. During his address at the opening session of the World Leaders Summit at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, President el-Sisi said that people around the world expect their leaders to take real and concrete steps towards reducing emissions, enhancing adaptation with the consequences of climate change, and providing the necessary financing for developing countries that suffer the most from the current climate crisis. The President asserted that all the efforts should focus on implementing measures that curb climate change, adding that the coming generations must not bear the consequences of mistakes they did not make. El-Sisi added that the conference's outcome will contribute to making the lives of millions of people better. The head of state also underscored the needs of the world today outpaces climate crisis and slogans, and that the people want a reduction of emissions and providing finances for that. He pointed that serious steps to contribute to strengthening green investments were undertaken in Egypt, and that it is important that priorities of all developing countries be addressed. He also called on participants to make their messages to the world clear and to take part in new initiatives to be presented by Egypt. President el-Sisi also urged developed nations to take serious steps to deliver their promises and called for an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. He added that there have been suffering for 2 years from the coronavirus and now the Russia-Ukraine crisis. In a session on the sidelines of the UN Climate Change Conference COP27, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced the start of the Green Middle East Initiative. In his address before the session, President el-Sisi reiterated that the initiative aims at enhancing joint efforts to face climate change repercussions in the Arab region. The President pointed out that due to these repercussions, Egypt is now establishing a number of ambitious projects on natural resources sustainability. The head of state also affirmed that the initiative stipulates boosting cooperation and coordination among the scientific research institutions of the participating countries. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said the kingdom would contribute $2.5 billion to the Green Initiative in the Middle East over the next 10 years and host its headquarters. The initiative was launched by the Crown Prince last year as part of efforts to reduce regional carbon emissions. And President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received today the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, on the sidelines of COP27 summit in Sharm el-Sheikh. Presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said that during the talks, President el-Sisi welcomed the Italian Prime Minister, reiterating his congratulations on her recent taking over of the Italian top post. El-Sisi and Meloni discussed energy, the climate crisis, and immigration. For her part, Meloni affirmed her country's keenness to strengthen bilateral cooperation with Egypt, which opens up prospects of construction and achieves the common interests of the two friendly countries and peoples. The spokesman added that the meeting tackled the case of the Italian student Regini, stressing on the significance of cooperation in order to reach justice. These were some of the main stories making the news today, but now starting out and focusing our attention to tonight's topic, the food shortage. The global food security is at risk. Over 350 million family farmers warn the world leaders of the food crisis. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back. The UN Climate Summit COP27 kicked off on Sunday in Sharm el-Sheikh with 90 heads of state meeting to discuss food security and climate finance. Organizations representing more than 350 million family farmers and producers published an open letter to world leaders on Monday, warning that global food security is at risk unless governments boost adaptation finance for small-scale production and promote a shift to more diverse, low-input agriculture. The letter says that building a food system that can feed the world on a hot planet must be a priority for COP27. Over 70 networks and organizations representing farmers, fishers, pastoralists and forest producers have signed the letter, including the World Rural Forum, which represents 35 million family farmers across 5 continents. The Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, which represents 200 million small-scale producers on the continent, and the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Development, with 13 million members. The letter warns that the global food system is ill-equipped to deal with the impacts of climate change, even if we limit global heating to 1.5 degrees Celsius, and says building a food system that can feed the world on a hot planet must be a priority for COP27. Small-scale producers are critical for global food security, producing as much as 80% of the food consumed in regions such as Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. Yet they accounted for only 1.7% of climate finance flows in 2018, just $10 billion compared to the estimated $240 billion a year needed to help them adapt to climate change. Progress on finance is key to success at COP27. At the Glasgow Climate Summit in 2021, wealthy nations agreed to double overall funding for adaptation to $40 billion a year by 2025. Still only a fraction of what is required. COP27 is taking place in the middle of a global food price crisis. While there is not yet a global food shortage, extreme drought, floods and heat has damaged harvests across the globe, and scientists have warned of an increased risk of simultaneous crop failures in the world's major bread baskets. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has said a shift to more diverse, low-input food systems is key to maintaining food security in a changing climate. Food and agriculture are largely overlooked in climate negotiations, despite being responsible for 34% of emissions, the majority of which come from industrial agriculture. The signatories call on governments to work with them to build a stronger, more sustainable and fairer food system. Food and agriculture have been sidelined in climate negotiations, and the concerns of smallholder producers ignored. Small-scale family farmers need a seat at the table and a say in the decisions that affect us, from secure access to land and tenure to accessing finance, if we are to rebuild our broken food system. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And on the sidelines of COP27, Nile TV senior correspondent Tagreed Hussein held an interview with Mrs. Renata Reck, who is the ambassador of climate of Switzerland and an observer from the Eco Village Network. Let's check out this interview and we'll be right back.
On Nile TV International, we're bringing you the beat from Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Many nationalities, you know, you could meet everyone on the globe here at COP27. We're really honored to have with us one of the observers at COP27, Renata Reck, and she's from Swaziland. Thank you so much, Renata, for joining us, and tell me more about your participation at COP27. First time to share your ideas at a COP.
Yes, indeed. First time I'm here representing Global Eco Village Africa. So I'm the Eco Village Ambassador for Eswatini, the Kingdom of Swaziland, previously known as. And so far the vibe has been very good. We're very excited to see what our governments will be doing for the changes regarding climate change. And we're also very excited to see the big organizations, what are they doing to not tell us lies anymore and give us the truth about how are they going to apply their new concepts that they're going to give us real food and real changes in what they're producing for us.
Yes. Tell me more about, I'm really interested to know the Eco Village. It seems definitely a story of success because the whole world today is going eco-friendly.
Definitely. So Is a community, whether you're in a city or in a suburb or you're in a rural area, together and you self-sustain each other, look after each other, help each other with our food, our education, and also sustainability in energies, and looking after the earth and looking after the forests that are surrounding our eco-villages.
That sounds very interesting. How about the youth participation? Because we do have here in East an investment in Egypt's youth, and they are hands-on with the different stakeholders vis-a-vis fighting climate change.
Yes, indeed. In Egypt, you have Sekim, the eco-village here. There's a lot of youth that are coming from Sekim in Egypt. I'm a friend right now, the Eco-Village Youth Network. So we include the youth, we include the elders, we include young people. Eco-Village design is and it's for all communities. It's something that we can actually think about huddling together, looking after each other in these kind of communities, so that we don't feel the impact of the climate change and that 1.5 degree temperature change. It is applying with what we can grow, coffee, cocoa, that are organic, that we can grow for our future generation and our children.
Right. Mrs. Rek, talking about the sense of awareness, talking climate change requires a sense of awareness to the people, and also providing incentives. How about that, the objectives and the vision? How do you see that?
The incentives is that we're going to live longer. We're going to live as real human beings, organic human beings. We're going to live in places that we know are safe. We're not going to be drowning. We know that we can make small impacts with the climate. In fact, small microclimates around our eco-villages because of the agroecology, because of the permaculture situations. We're going to create little microclimates that will actually bring us further into the next generation and help us survive.
Yeah. Definitely we're working here at COP27 for the coming generations. Yes. We're working for tomorrow. We're working to have a COP that is going to make all the difference. And Egypt is speaking the voice of Africa at COP27. So definitely are pinning very much high hope on COP27.
We have very much high hope. As you know, perhaps, that when we talk about organic food, there's over 40% of Europe, there's over 40% of Northern Africa, and when you count Africa and all the other Asian and Indonesian countries, we are less the organic market. So this is the same as well when we talk about the climate changes. Our climate change is going to be that we are taking note of. We are not the ones that we are creating this climate disasters. We know that the global north has been creating a lot of climate disasters, and we want to address those kind of issues. We want to have a new dispensation that these large organizations are doing, and what we can work together with these organizations.
Definitely. I thank you so much, Mr. Renata Rek, for joining Nile TV International and for being with us at COP27. Always welcome in your home country, in the mother of the world.
Thank you so much. And sanibonani nonke ekhaya, ngiyathokozisa, siyabonga kakhulu.
What does that translate?
I'm home and having the traditional method of greeting.
Thank you so much, Renata. Greeting you her way. That was the ambassador of climate coming to you right away from Swaziland and sharing with us here with her thoughts and vision and her participation at COP27. Egypt making history.
إنني وإذ أتطلع إلى استقبالكم من قمة المناخ 27 التي تستضيفها مصر في شرم الشيخ.
Thank you, Taghreed, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're joined here in the studio by Engineer Hassan Shabaan, the economic and agricultural expert. Engineer Shabaan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Appreciate
it. Sir, now, when we talk about food insecurity, now, how is this possible in the 21st century with the 21st century technology? How is the world still threatened by food insecurity? What does that mean, and what are the reasons and the relation between climate change and food insecurity?
See, the humanity and the planet is really facing a challenge. In spite of the fact that that humanity managed to score a very high level of technology and advanced science, but again, humanity worked for a century, better than a century, against itself, since the Industrial Revolution in Europe. The leap that the humanity made in the field of industry and the use of coal, then oil, actually hurt the climate tremendously. The increase in temperature have changed the climate, and now humanity is threatened by really significant damage, meaning the North Pole and the South Pole are facing melting due to the fact that there is an increase in temperature. So far, humanity failed in controlling the increased uprising temperature, and the amount of water produced from melting both North Pole and South will actually damage a lot of fertile land. By the way, one of the countries that will be damaged, really hurt, is Egypt. Our delta is threatened within the next 50 years by the rise of the water level in the Mediterranean. So definitely a lot of very fertile land is being hurt due to the rise of the temperature, climate changes, emissions, the rainfall rates have changed tremendously in a lot of areas. We've seen in Europe this year a number of rivers that actually dried suddenly, but all of this is due to climate changes and I don't want to say the foolish behavior of humanity. We're working against ourselves, but hopefully, in a conference like COP27, we will be able to, pressure the major countries that actually caused this to happen, is to respect their commitments in earlier conferences like Glasgow and Paris and so forth. The amount required to improve the climate conditions for countries in Africa especially Africa actually does not really contribute to the emissions, not more than 5%.
Yes.
But we are really hurt. Desert, a lot of very fertile lands are turned into desert. A lot of the green forest is disappearing, and jungles. A lake like Chad Lake have disappeared completely, and that was a very bad sign that the continent is facing a lot of difficulties. So the amount required is $200 billion US, and countries like the US, China, and a lot of the major major industrial countries will have to abide to their commitments in earlier conferences and start. So in this conference, I think a question will be asked: when are you going to pay the bill?
Yes.
Especially a continent like Africa. All the African countries require help to improve the living conditions in Africa. We go to the food crisis in Africa, with some help from the advanced countries. Africa could improve their agriculture, water resources, a lot of things could take place. One of the things that actually we should be concerned of, especially in Egypt and the River Nile Basin countries, is the rainfall rate in the equator area and the tropical areas in Africa. I think we cannot afford the luxury of wasting water. A lot of this water that actually falls in this area seeps to the Gulf of Aden or to the Atlantic Ocean in Congo. When you actually watch the Congo River, you'll be surprised that a lot of its water actually seeps to the Atlantic Ocean. The area, Ethiopia and Djibouti and all this area, the 50% of the rainfall in this area seeps to the Gulf of Aden, and I think we should cooperate as African countries to try to improve the water reserves and the water security, to improve again agriculture and food supplies, and then Africa will be self-sufficient if ever we do that.
Well, Engineer Shabaan, apart from the $200 billion that is needed, the funding to combat that, now, what are the sort of actions and technologies that are needed to boost the agricultural sector and empower the higher food productivity? And as you've mentioned, for instance, really saving a lot of the wasted water from the rainfalls.
Actually, there is a lot of ways to improve or to face the challenge. First of all, trying to change the face of the desert. As long as you keep the desert green, you will improve the humidity degree in the desert, and it will not be like a mirror reflecting heat, and it will just kick off these clouds that could improve the environment and the agricultural conditions. So there is a number of methods that you could actually grow food or certain crops directly on salt water. Genetically, if you change some of the genes in certain plants, you could actually produce a family of plants that could digest sodium chloride. And this is very well known in the Gulf countries, Saudi and United Arab Emirates, and in Egypt. Actually, we have a lot of researches done to have agros on salt directly. We need also to improve the amount of the green areas that we have in our countries. Also, water treatment is a key. We cannot afford the luxury of just getting rid of sewage water without really treating it, because we could recycle this water and again use it. In the UK, they use water 7 times before it just disappears. They just desalinate it over and over again, and it's always suitable for human consumption.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, definitely a very big issue dealing not just with climate change, but also the food productivity and the food insecurity that is a result of the threat of climate change. One of the things and one of the main topics being discussed only on the second day of the COP27, as Engineer Shabaan mentioned. A lot of things could be done, a lot of technologies, a lot of actions and strategies can help empower the higher food productivity. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Engineer Hassan Shabaan, the economic and agricultural expert. Engineer Shabaan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Always a pleasure, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.